You're listening to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast. Today on our show, we have a special guest. Of course, every guest is special, but I like to think right now this guest is particularly special. This guest has been leading a ScummVM project development for almost 2 decades. He's touched around 2.5 million lines of code. Imagine that. Giving retro enthusiasts the ability to play their favorite games, often with added features, improved graphics, and more that we'll get into during this episode. May I please introduce to all of you, Eugene Sandulenko. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Thank you guys for inviting me. Yes, it's definitely a pleasure. Yeah. So here I am.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you, mate. I'm, I've thought about this before the episode, how to word my affinity for your project, because it's like I'm not sure if you can be a fan of a virtual machine, but I guess I am, right? Because it's been a long time where at least a decade for me where I've been, just downloading daily builds and particularly having a lot of interest in the iOS ports and building them and playing with them and turning old iDevices into basically just adventure game emulators thanks to you. So as a fan, I guess I should thank you very much for all your hard work because looking at some of the comments and getting things like that, it's unbelievable how much you guys do every single day.
Yeah, indeed, and thank you for sharing this because this is one of the primary reasons why we are doing this, to make the lovers of adventure games happy and to revitalize some of those games. And we were so happy to see them coming back to market, available to users, because there are so many gems, hidden and not so hidden, like dramatic things like Monkey Island. So that's why we are doing this still.
Yeah, and just again, extremely grateful for that because, for example, I guess we're just kind of gonna get right into it. It turns out, but I was listening to your lovely interview on the Retro Tea Break. To our listeners, you should check that out. His entire channel is lovely, and it's a wonderful interview. But you had mentioned there that 2 of your favorite adventure games are also 2 of mine. Like they're in my top 5 or 10. I don't know. I change that list every month, but that being the Neverhood and Blade Runner. Just if I had to say my favorite non-Sierra, non-LucasArts adventure games, those 2 are it. So cheers, mate, because that's some good taste, and it's also just a great example of what Scum does for us because those games come from an era that is really difficult to emulate games, right, from that late 90s era. So to be able to say to somebody, if you find a CD with Neverhood on eBay, you can just bloody run it on Scum on your Nintendo Switch, even if you want.
Yeah, right. Exactly. ScummVM is all about portability, and the weirdest ports where most of those games can work, where the port for the Samsung TV sets. So no computer, just a TV set. Of course, now we have Android in every TV, but we have this port for like 15 years. But the one port which I'm particularly proud of is the port which natively runs on Nintendo 64. Like, can you imagine that? Like, it's a cartridge-based system, and you have some cartridge with the flash memory in them, and you can take a DOS game, which is like in the imagination of many people, like tons more powerful system, and it still runs on Nintendo 64. Amazing.
Incredible. Yeah. So since we're kind of on the topic of ports, I was curious as to the process behind how Scum ends up to a specific port. Whether that's one of the ports I quite enjoy, even if it's I'm not sure the word for it, but I really enjoy the Windows 9 export. Because for example, I'm making a game in AGS, so I get to put my game in Scum on my my 486 and see it on my CRT, and it's really cool. So just kind of curious, like how the process behind a port, does it come from just like a passionate community member, or, if you wouldn't mind, just walk us through, how you decide to port things where?
Yes, absolutely. Let me do it. But before that, I would like to do a little clarification. And this is something common. A lot of people, they called our project just the Scum. But Scum is the script creation utility for Maniac Mansion. This is one particular engine which was used by LucasArts. And ScummVM itself, we contain 94 engines by this moment. So when you talk about Scum, this is like 1/94th of the whole project. So this is just a little nitpick, I would say. But still, like people say, hey, it's not working on Scum. But for us, it's like we have a team which is responsible specifically for the Scum-based games, and for them, it's not to them; it's to someone else, right? So in regards of the port, how it works, the project itself, from the very, very beginning, was created about portability. What does it mean? We implemented this abstraction platform or hardware abstraction layer, which is called OSystem. Just historical name. Don't ask me why. I think it was because objective system. It was OSystem, and then it is like a kernel, let's put it, or something which is like a library. And then when you have a game engine, which is a program which is supposed to operate and supposed to manipulate with the game data files, like showing pictures there, playing sound there, reacting to some input, etc. Right, there are all different technologies for all of this multitude of the games. When the engine needs to talk, original one, let's say it was written for those, when it needs to talk to screen or talk to, let's say, to the timer, or talk to CD drive for playing CD track, then we adapted to use our API of this whole system, meaning that all the engines, they are working on top of this common hardware abstraction layer. So that comes with the one part. And then we have somebody who is passionate about some particular platform. Let's say one of the more recent ports were to Nintendo Switch. It was mentioned already. And then person knows, for instance, how to play a sound on a platform, or how to show picture, and all the different, or how to access file system. And what they need to do, they need to implement only those relatively little pieces of code which will be talking to specific hardware. To give you an example, we are showing, and we were working for a long while with only two-dimensional games. Like, great example, Monkey Island. It is two-dimensional game. Like a contrast is Myst 3, which is three-dimensional game, right? And but Dreamcast, it doesn't have even a concept of two dimensions. It can draw only polygons, and the backend for Dreamcast renders things on the texture, which is then projected on a polygons, which are simulating to this two-dimensional look. This is like one example. Another example. Tell me if I go too much into details. Another example is Nintendo.
I love this. Please, details.
Yes. Nintendo 64 or Nintendo double screen, for instance. Nintendo double screen doesn't have concept of file. It is just a continuous block of memory. Some of it exists in a game cartridge, some of this is RAM, etc., etc. So in order to put a game into Nintendo double screen, we had to actually simulate the file system. So we take in the file games original and we pack them and produce then like ROM FS, which is then transferred to Nintendo double screen, and this is how it works. So so that's the process. So we need somebody who has not so intimate, but at least okay knowledge of a specific platform. Uh, they joined the project, and by my estimate, I still hold it. Maybe with 3D games, it's a bit longer, but for 2D games, it takes about a couple of weeks of evenings, like all of us volunteers, right, in order to port a system for a specific platform, and then all of the hundreds and thousands of games will work because remember, right, all of those games, they are built on top of this abstraction layer, and then you implement it.
Right.
A good example for you could be Java. That's a perfect example because Java VM is a relatively small thing, and then Java is so could be so tiny that it works even if you remember it was mobile phones, the old ones, not smartphones.
Right.
It was like a small stripped down Java, but still Java, right? And then you remember the motto of Java: write once, run everywhere, because you have Java VM, and ScummVM is not like exactly like Java VM in this sense because we have bunch of virtual machines inside of it. But in terms of the abstraction, this is how it works. I hope I answered your question very, very lengthy into details. But
what about text games? How does that differ, and how has the port of that particular type of game been going?
There is no difference from the standpoint of Scum of a system, ScummVM again, because what we do, we have our text rendering engine, which is free type library, if you heard about this. And then we just render it on a surface and show in a picture because from the standpoint of all the backends, they see no difference. It is just internals of the engine. Yeah, because again, like ScummVM is a implementation. You can have whatever logic if you have it in a game and then porting it to a system, and this is how it will work within ScummVM.
Okay. So let me ask you, if you don't mind. I'm curious as to how or the process behind when Scum. I'm not sure the exact correct wording, but inherits an engine. Like, for example, I believe Scum, or maybe perhaps merged is better. When Scum merged, was it Nagy or Sarian? Things, when you merge, let's say, with the SCI engine or AGI engine, or even more recently when you merged the AGS engine. I was kind of curious, what the process is behind that, the amount of work, the amount of code. It's a bit of a two-part, but I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, that's a good question because I was working on the AGI version, or AGI engine, actually. It was my pet project because I grew up on this Euro games, and it was for me, a very important milestone. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Actually, frankly speaking, about about AGI engine specifically, I made a mistake. I chose the wrong interpreter. At that point, there was two implementation. It was Sarian and it was NAGI. And I chose Sarian because it was seamlessly supporting so many games because it was fine detection system. But it was very hacky and inaccurate. And until maybe like 5 years ago, we had the graphics subsystem fully rewritten, and this is when we finally reached out proper compatibility. So back to your question, how a porting of an existing code looks like. That's the thing. It is not different from porting of a commercial game when we have access to original source code and porting of some existing ones. So consider this. There was there was free SCI, or there was AGS. AGS was originally built on top of the SDL, simple direct layer. And then SDL is very similar to what our system does, But our system has much more functionality. Like we have video format decoders, graphics decoders, etc., etc. But basically, it comes down to rendering a bunch of pixels, square of pixels on a screen. First, like initializing the screen, meaning that you are requesting what would be the color, what would be the palette. Then you initialize it, and then you start, for instance, there should be some part of the engine of AJS, for instance, which talks to keyboard. And then what we did, we replaced this call to SDL with call to OSystem. And like slowly going through the whole source and replacing all of these specific calls to OSystem calls. This is the porting of engine to minimal, let's say, porting of engine to ScummVM. Very often we go beyond that, and we do enhancement. We do some maybe re-architecturing of the engine, or we support several different versions of a single engine. When, for instance, a CI, it's a very good example, super messy. I don't know how many hundreds of minor different versions they had. We combine everything in the one single piece of code, which works with all of them. And so this is how we do. This is the process. And of course, like when we talk about commercial games, it's not seldom when we see that the programmers apparently were learning programming when they were writing those. And the code quality is, how to say, I don't know, like very yes. And we end up rewriting it. Yes.
Why do you code? When was the first time you put together a code? What kind of led you in this direction? I mean, obviously it sounds like you were a bit of a gamer growing up, so you must have had computers growing up or access to games as a kid.
Yes, I did. I had access, but are you asking me about programming in general or specifically a ScummVM project?
Kind of what led you to the ScummVM project? Did you just start programming with ScummVM, or were you working on programming on your own, like say with doing Full Throttle? Was that your first project, or was there stuff before that?
Okay. When I was doing Full Throttle, I had already 10 years of experience. And out of those 10 years of experience, 3 years prior to that were with reverse engineering. Because with Full Throttle, we didn't have and still don't have the access to the original source code. All of this is reverse engineered. And this is very painstakingly, like a very difficult process. How I did, I went to a shop and I saw this great game, which I like. I was reading the description. It seems to be appealing. I bought it. I came home, and I was running FreeBSD at home, my home computer, not Windows. And then I started to take a look, how can I play this game? And Googling, or maybe it was Alta Vista at the time, I don't remember, quickly brought me to ScummVM. And it was at that moment 0.5 version. And indeed, Full Throttle was supported. I launched it, and the game was not recognized because it was localized into Russian, but it was very easy to fix. I fixed it. Then it started to show me something and immediately crashed. But I'm a programmer, right? So like I decided to see why it is crashed. It's open source, and it was another fix into the font rendering, obviously because it was written in Cyrillic, not with the Latin alphabet. So there was some difference there. Then I started to play further, and at that moment, we didn't have this insane subsystem. Insane is the used for the bike fights. If you play the game, there is adventure and then switch to the bike fights. Instead of that, we were showing, instead of this huge chunk of game where you have to fight for the ramp, ScummVM was showing a pop-up. It's like, oh, insane is not implemented. Here is your ramp. Good luck with the rest of the game. If you, this is not the full experience. I would like to have the full experience.
Yeah.
And it's not a very long game to begin with, so.
Yeah. And then I jumped to IRC. I'm an IRC user from 1995, and by the way, it was 2003. And so it was for me natural to jump to IRC and speak directly to developers. I still remember like Fingelfin, the Max Horn, the co-lead of that time. He was telling me, "Oh, good luck with this insane subsystem." I didn't recognize why. I can tell you, if I would only knew that it will take me 3.5 months of practically every evening till the late night of reverse engineering, I wouldn't probably dare to even start it. But then I went into it. Yes, I went into it. It was like really very like knee deep in the code. My sleeves were rolled up, and then I would stop only when I remember I was starting to submit in patches, and it was awkward via SourceForge. And then at some point, Max Findelfin, he got fed of me, and he told, "Okay, here is your SVN subversion access. Go commit it directly." And this is how I joined the team. I wanted to play this game. Later, just a little bit later, I had kids, and I found out these beautiful games, and I still recommend. Of course, it's like every parents decide for themselves. But if anybody would ask me, I would highly recommend, if you have children, get them raised on these beautiful creations of Ron Gilbert, humongous entertainment games.
Oh, yeah. Humongous.
Yes.
I think, you know what, Paul and I have been doing just that.
Yes. Yeah.
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 And
absolutely.
Go.
Yeah, it's wonderful advice. Yeah, my son, as well as Anne's children, have been playing, Freddy Fish and I think everything but Spy Fox on my end. But yeah, that is really good advice.
We did. Spy Foxes are hard even for me. Those are like the grown-up humongous games in a way.
Yeah.
Great mystery games. I love them all.
And I wanted these games to be played. Yeah. And we teamed up with Travis Hollow. Kirben, unfortunately, he kind of left the project since like 10 years ago. And we started to hack. And it was a lot of like goods and bads when we were doing it, and it was breakthrough. I still remember this. Still, it's just imprinted in my brain. This breakthrough when Travis come to me, take a look at this, run it, and we had some humongous entertainment. I think it was airport with Buzzy, which starts with the airplane flying through the left to right in the screen, and it was the very first thing which we saw in the engine. It was like exciting. Yeah, this brought me like much more deeper to the project.
Yeah, that's the payoff. Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, it does remind me, honestly, of, I guess, who I'm speaking to in a sense, because I've not to overly soften or romanticize the episode all of a sudden, but I have spent hours on the floor of my living room next to my 5, 6, 7, whatever he is at the time, year old son, on ScummVM playing humongous games or Day of the Technical or Mixed Up Mother Goose or anything like that, literally on Scum and just having like recreating memories with my son that I had with my father that mean a lot to me. I don't know how much they mean to my son. We'll find out. But for now, they mean a lot to me, and I get to do that because of the work you put in. So, just in case it's not said enough, thank you very much again for what you do.
Oh, thank you.
But that being said, too, I do want to ask you a couple more technical questions. One of them is kind of related to things we've touched on in the last 2 or 3 questions, in the sense that you had mentioned that not having access to the source code means reverse engineering and what it takes to merge an engine. And this brings me to, I guess you could say, the dynamics question, or dynamics question. Because from what I loosely understand, like each one of their games has its own custom engine or something. So would you mind walking us through, kind of what the issue is there? Because I feel like learning about that will kind of help us understand how engines are implemented and how much work goes into a single game on your end.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's an engine? Engine is basically all the game logic which was in the original executable. That's what is consists of ScummVM engine. There are two big groups of engines. We can split them into two. One part is virtual machines, and one part is so-called hard-coded ones. What does it mean? It was invented by, I think, by Ron Gilbert for Maniac Mansion. If you remember that at that moment there was a big zoo of small and bigger systems like Atari, I know, Amiga, Apple, just DOS, and for Maniac Mansion exists on those platforms originally. I mean, and they came up with this clever idea. Instead of hard coding the game and writing it in a C, they wrote a relatively high-level language, which is Scum, which had things like move actor from this point to this point. And you can imagine that behind the scene, there was like tons of actual code which is doing this, decoding graphics, and like layers, priorities, etc., etc. They did it for two purposes. One of them, it let them port Scum to Scum-based games to any new system very easily and straightforward. And second, they let non-programmers write the actual game scripts. So these are the type of engines which are based on the virtual machines. And as you can imagine, the size of this virtual machine is relatively small. Because, for instance, early versions of Scum, they had about 200 opcodes or even less, and that's it. AGI early versions were like 80 opcodes, and if you remember, the original executable is like 30 kilobytes or something. And as a result, this is the amount of code you need to reverse engineer, and you are just rewriting this.
Wow.
And then this is one thing, and then second one, since it is like portable virtual machine, the code itself is much cleaner, much better organized.
Right.
And this is one part, and then second part, and this is where the dynamics games stand at. It is when all of the game logic for every room, for every inventory item, for every object on the screen is written in C or Pascal, or which is worse in C++, because then you have hundreds of kilobytes of code, and it's so tedious and so boring because it's like repeatedly same thing over and over again. And if you have 100 rooms, and then for every rooms, even 10 kilobytes, you're talking about megabytes of code. This, by the way, what was happening with the Blade Runner, because every location, it's a single separate DLL. So the project had like 90 DLLs. Can you imagine the amount of work? This is why we were talking. It took us 8 years to reverse engineer that.
Oh my God!
So
we could do a whole episode on Blade Runner alone.
Yeah. So that's the primarily problem. And dynamics, they are unfortunately hard coded. So when a person takes it, okay, they will implement like reading of the resources, but then the game logic starts, and it's like a triple face palm. It's tons of work. You have to have a really big love for those games in order to do it. Maybe sooner or later it will happen. It happened with Blade Runner. It happened with the Ring World, which is all hard-coded. It happened with the Titanic, which is Starship Titanic, which is
It's a great game. And because you have your text parser and everything mixed in with that one.
And this is Dream Master is a machine. Like Paul, he is reversing so many things, and if not Paul, we would never do it, because it used to be the biggest engine for a short while in ScummVM until we had AGS, because it's so complex, a lot of work.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to another more kind of obscure question, perhaps. One I'll just kind of say for the listeners is that the ScummVM does a lot of neat things kind of under the surface, under the hood or whatever, as far as like the ScummVM tool pack that you can download from the website. And one of the things I had some fun with was extracting my copy of the Maniac Mansion for NES ROM, and ScummVM is then able to take the data files and run the NES version of Maniac Mansion in Scum, which is really fun. So a two-part question, one being, what does it take going behind that? I imagine it's a little, it involves somebody with some experience, I would imagine, on the Nintendo or console side. And then the other part of the question would be, could I, just in a personal, selfish sort of way, could I hope for, let's say, the same ability for the King's Quest Nintendo release, or is there something holding that back, or is perhaps it not in SCI like the Revolution port? So yeah, kind of a lot of questions on the console end of these games.
Yeah, you actually have you know the answer for this. I mean, yes, you will hear. So first of all, in terms of the NES port of Maniac Mansion, by the way, I was also very, very closely involved in it, but Quietus did most of the programming, because he is very, very, very well versed with NES internals. This is exactly based on the Scum engine. It is, as we call it internally, Scum 1.5. So it is between 1 and between version 2. Of course, the graphics is all different, the graphics formats, and the music is all different. We had actually to sometimes people call ScummVM an emulator, but it is not. It's just re-implementation. But for instance, we have emulator for the NES sound chip. So we have that piece of code, and then it was just very, very internally. Maniac Mansion for NES is like scripts are basically the same as Maniac Mansion EGA version. Like it is practically the same game, just the graphics is different and sound is different. While King's Quest, it is not a CI engine. It's a completely different. They took the game assets, but it is the all custom thing. I don't know. I think it is even hard coded. So this is why adding support to it, that would mean that somebody, in terms of the ScummVM, has to create a new engine from the scratch.
Wow! Right.
Wow.
Another good example for you is the Broken Sword. We had for the Broken Sword from the very beginning the original engine code, and it was very good collaborations with the Revolution software. How it's called? Game Theater, I believe, something like this. No, I don't remember the original name. But later they created Broken Sword from the Nintendo double screen. If you remember this, there was this release. And that engine is a virtual theater, and that engine is different. So this is why, while we support Broken Sword for DOS, Windows, and for PSX, the original ones, we cannot support Broken Sword from the Nintendo double screen because it's a new engine. We just need to create everything from the scratch. I have a good example for you. Another good example for you. Have you heard about Maniac Mansion Deluxe, which was created on AGS? This is exactly what happened with King Quest. Somebody took the original idea and just rewrote everything in the new engine.
Okay. Yeah, very clear. Thank you. Yeah, and you know, real quick, is it the same scenario with the Sega release of King's Quest 1?
I think so. No, I don't remember. I didn't know they exist.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought of it too. I'm not sure if I've ever searched the Scum wiki for it to look at that later.
No, because I think you support the PlayStation version of Monkey Island, right? Or Monkey Island 2, is it that's on there?
Monkey Island 4, the Escape from Monkey Island exists on PlayStation. Yes,
Oh,
that's
okay, yeah,
what.
that's the one.
But Escape for Monkey Island is not Scum engine; it's so-called Grime engine. Grim Fandango and
Oh.
Monkey Island 4 are based on this game because they are 3D.
Right. Okay. Well, you know what, that'll transition me nice into my next note here for you. Now correct me if I'm wrong. I feel I could totally be wrong too, but I felt like when I was first getting involved with Scum 10 years ago, there was maybe an aversion to any 3D games. Whereas fast forward to today, Scum, for example, I guess easily put recently merged with the sister project Residual VM. And for listeners who don't know, Residual was used to handle what the Longest Journey, Grim Fandango, the more the 3D games. So the question being, what was behind the decision to merge those two and to, I guess, perhaps loosen up a little bit as far as what Scum would not emulate, what Scum would support?
So the original Residual VM, how it was born. It was part of our team, and we just had all of these LucasArts games, which were 2D, and then there was Grim Fandango and Monkey Island 4, which were kind of residual of the whole LucasArts thing. This is hence the pun of the name Residual VM.
Yeah, nice. I never put that
And
together. Nice.
yeah, and 3D games, they are much more complex internally. And at that moment, which was maybe like, I don't know, 17, 16 years ago, it was relatively difficult for us to support those because compatibility with 3D games was much, much lower. Residual VM is still working those games mostly on the desktops, and now there is Android port, but no other one. And for us as a project, it was always kind of, we would like to have newly added engines supported on as many platforms as possible. And this is why Residual VM was standing separate. Then later, because of some of internal tensions, the project split out. And at that moment, when it was split out, it was supporting only Grim Fandango. Then it was later when they added the Longest Journey, the Mist 3, and now in Cold Blood, which is in works. But they were sister project in a sense. It was the same old system. But in additional to all of this code which we have for decoding graphics formats, decoding audio formats, they had additional pieces of code which are working with 3D games. And what was happening also is that they approximately once a year, they were taking all of our system changes and were porting back to the residual VM. And every year it was more and more difficult, cumbersome. This is one reason, so we wanted to solve that. But second one, this is something which I don't like, but this is reality. More and more old platforms are dying. As you take a look now, we have only few active platforms. Like nobody plays with iRigs, nobody plays with, I don't know what, the Nintendo 64 already. Palm OS is very, very old, and nobody is playing. The actual hardware is old. Nobody is even there to run it. It's too like time expensive. And as a result, now we have no problem of this, that it will be not so well supported, and the compilers became more powerful. So this is why for us we were thinking What's the difference? There is no much difference, at least with the current terms. The architecture became much more complex, and it was just the nature of them. It took
Right.
about maybe 3 years of negotiations. I was talking to Pavel Quadran and was trying to convince him to join back because he originally split out. But eventually, we just decided to merge our code bases. It took us several months of like background work, and now we happily accept also 3D games. And now I remember there was something else. We started to expand the project scope a bit earlier before that because when we advertised that we are now supporting role-playing games as well. Why we did that? Because we practically finished most of the low hanging fruits of the adventure games. Most the games which are left, yes, they are hard coded or bizarre, like no interest in them, not much interest. But there was some of our prominent team members, they were into RPGs, and this is how it started. So that moment we was like, okay, we are accepting adventures and RPGs. Why not 3D games? We also
Right.
started to accept text adventures as well. So
Yeah.
our original notion that only 2D point and click adventures is now void. So now, okay, and
Right.
no 3D.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, and I do think for the better too. It's really nice having it all in one spot. I think a lot of us adventure game fans have at least a soft spot, if not nostalgia, for some text adventures. I was really excited when you guys recently merged, the all the Infocom things over. Yeah, it's 100% for the better. There's very few things Scum can't do nowadays.
Yeah, it's exciting actually.
And
Just looking at the list, checking on what's new, what's been added. Because so many of us like so many obscure games from here and there that it's like a gift when one of them appear on ScummVM.
Yeah, and we recently did an episode on Sanitarium, and we were happy to report at the end of the episode, hey, it's now officially supported in Scum. The next release, the official release isn't out yet, but grab a daily build and you can play it in a stable environment. So that kind of stuff's really nice. Well, I don't want to keep too much of your time, so I'm having to nix a lot of my remaining questions, but I got two more for you. So I guess
I'm sorry.
the first one.
I just wanted to like finish to wrap up the previous because something popped to my mind.
Oh,
Another
please, yeah.
great merger, which is very very similar, MAME and MESS.
Oh.
MAME,
You
right?
remember? So MAME and MESS, which was originally for emulating computers and emulating arcades, and then at some point they merged, together. And it was very, very similar fate of both projects because there was so much of the code overlap that at some point people decided, okay, why we should support two code bases.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great example. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
No
Now it's all in one
questions.
spot. Oh, right. Okay. So I guess I'll start with the AGS one. This one's kind of fun and personal to me as I am developing a game with AGS, and I was just over the moon. It literally made my week when I saw the announcement that AGS was testing was available in the daily builds, and of course the first thing I did was load up my own game, and within 2 weeks I watched it go from understandably wonky to kind of perfect as it stands now. And so I just wanted to get a little bit of the history from you behind AGS. From what I understand, it was something you guys had hoped to do for a while. And then right before I get that from you, to our listeners and to any potential developers who use AGS, I just want to say, as a developer, it's really nice to have ScummVM support an adventure game you're making in AGS, because I was able to, for example, port my game immediately. AGS doesn't natively support Mac, so I could immediately port it to Mac or any of the just wider range of ports that are available for Scum, as we've been discussing. To play my own game on my iPhone, for example, is really fun. So to any developers out there, it's a great tool to have. You kind of you can make your own basically Scum VM wrapper. Personally speaking, I just kind of reverse engineered, to be gratuitous, what GOG did as far as how they were launching Scum games, and just made a batch for for Windows and a shell script for the rest, and was good to go. So with all that being said, thank you first of all, because it helps us developers quite a lot get the game widespread. And then kind of back to the question as far as what was the driving force to merge AGS, and what was that like? Because there's a lot of games.
Yeah, great question. We wanted it before it was even there, when it was still a commercial project, closed sourced. And because there were so many great titles on this engine, and as you know, they're still being released. Just last week there was a Tide Waves, I think so. There was a new great indie game which was on the Kickstarter, and we wanted this. And then, of course, when the original author he declared that he gave up with the project, and this is why he's releasing the source code, we just immediately jumped on it. And we said, hey guys, we think that it's a perfect fit for us. We were asking, so many people were asking us. We had to use even a question about Maniac Mansion Deluxe in the FAQ, where we explained this. This is different engine, yada, yada, yes. And now we wanted this, but at that moment, some people have different memories. JS folks still have maybe different view, but we faced with like strong pushback from the original AGS guys, because when there was not original guys, but when the source was released, there immediately was created how to say, bunch of people around it, community, that's the word, of developers who wanted to advance it, who wanted to port it, develop it further, etc., etc. And they were telling us, hey, we have plans for developing the project further. And if we would have to obey to your release schedule, to your release practices, we are not interested in that. And for us, we still have this internal policy. We do not merge projects which are in active development, because this is like cat and mice. You always have to chase it. And this is why we thought, okay, we don't want it. But then later we saw that in the years there were not so many of development of the dramatic changes, and we didn't see practically a lot of advancement in the portability, especially because they were saying, "Oh, we are going to solve portability issues by ourselves." Well, we are thinking, like we were doing it for 20 years. It's not a piece of cake, but we are polite. This is why we were not telling it to them, and we were just watching. And then at some point, we decided to ourselves, "Okay, guys, we see that it is stable. We will take the stable code if we are okay to support it by our own, and we are okay to even if we, let's say, miss their further advancement, have support for thousands of the games." This is one question reason behind it. And second one, and we still have plans for this. It's so sad to see that the early games before 1.5, I believe, internal AGS version, are not supported by the modern AGS. So eventually we would like to bring this as well. Nice. So then we'll have the support for all of the games which are on AGS.
That's very exciting. We were recently speaking with on the show here with Francisco Gonzalez, who I'm sure the name rings a bell for you, obviously, of Grundoslav Games, and we kind of all got reminiscing about the early AGS days and some of his sillier games or early games, and he was like just really hoping that the pre 2.7 or whatever games will be available soon. So that is exciting to know that eventually down the line. But I don't want to get greedy because we just got AGS support, so I'm very thankful for what we have right now. All right. Well, that brings me, I guess to my last question for you, mate, and it's hopefully a fitting one. I'll just step back and say that I kept in touch with a lovely coder from your Google Summer Code project. His name was Ashwin, and he was. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess kind of leading a GUI implementation improvement. Basically, he was kind of leading the Summer Code project where Scum would get a little bit of more polish in the GUI in the form of graphical icons for each game, which I'm really excited about, and people can play with in the daily builds. But to tie that in with the actual question is, along with that, what do you see for the future of Scum? And for a bonus question, do you have any kind of bucket list items for Scum that you would, maybe just one day on a fantasy level like to see?
Yeah, we do. Our to-do list is quite long. So Ashwin, he was my student, by the way. I was mentoring him, brilliant young man. Yes, and he did a great job. Actually, I can tell you, it is his work is already has been merged, and it is in the dailies. And moreover, his work spawned the whole community of. We have now a bunch of people which like really vividly updating and creating those pictures, icons for the games.
Yes.
So once we have it released, we will hope to see like a lot of games covered with a very, very good and nice artwork. So it will be a very usable feature. And yes, there are like one of the most requested things, and we hope to have it work on it very soon, is support for shader-based scalars. The OpenGL is practically in every, like my fridge has OpenGL inside of it. So for us, it would be natural of trying to finally support that. So this is one of the bigger features. Of course, there are a number of the engines which are in the work. We have even Benjamin Jodu, who reverses engines for breakfast. We have maybe like 20 half-baked engines from him, and some. And eventually, we are going to finish. Like there is internal work on the how it's called. I remember the. Maybe you will remember this game. It was a Shadow of the Comet. Yes, engine is called Comet. This is being in work. Then we this very moment have pull request for the two-way escape from F5. This is German adventure. That's thing. We certainly hoping, for instance, I added to the JSOC project. We would really love to see Penumbra games supported by ScummVM, but we need somebody to working of the porting this HPL1 engine, which is open sourced for a while, but I didn't see any ports. So like nobody. It's very big thanks to the original authors company who open sourced it, but unfortunately I didn't see the community around it for increasing portability, etc. Maybe we will pick it up because those games certainly were pivotal. What else out of the bigger things? Well, there are like dozens of engines in the shadows, but no promises. And we every month I hear something like just last month I was talking about another game where we will hopefully have access to the original source code soon or later. And maybe we will ever expand it, right? Now we have 3.5 million lines of code, but that could be much more.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It is. Well, how big is your team? I mean, I guess people might come and go here and there because it's volunteer, but on average, about how many people are working with ScummVM at one time?
It is about, I would say that the core is about 50 developers, and extended core is maybe like 80 to 100. And if we take a look at the statistics, we have like 110, 120 contributors on every year. Sometimes people just submit patches.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a
That
big
makes
team.
sense. Is there anybody in particular you're looking for right now? If you had like a top 2 or 3 wish lists of a specific type, is it Nintendo programmers, or who is it you want on your team?
Android and iOS. We don't have Android and iOS porters for like 10 years, and the demand is huge. We just don't have those people. They not coming, and I'm giving a call practically in every interview. They're not coming. Please, if you have love towards adventures or RPGs and have experience with Androids, especially Android is very annoying. Every version they break compatibility, and we don't have people who are staying on the edge. Like for instance, at this moment, we barely managed to make ScummVM work normally on Android 10, but we have a bunch of one-star reviews because it doesn't work well on some of the Android 11. And now, 2 weeks ago, we had first bug report, one-star review, that it doesn't even start on Android 12. Come on. Like, we need somebody. And for iOS, it's the same thing. We would really like to bring ScummVM to App Store, but we are reluctant to do it without somebody who would have like a couple of hours per week, not that much time, for giving us helping hand. So that would be absolutely something which would help us big time.
Well, you're within the demographic. We may only have a couple of hundred listeners so far, but I'm going to guess about 90% of them are know somebody that knows something. So maybe we will have some luck out there. I also want to take a second to just thank a good friend of mine, Sergio Carmona, for introducing us to you, Eugene, because he was the one that kind of brought us together and said, you know what, I'd really love to hear some questions answered on your podcast. So thanks again for that.
Yeah, here.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would definitely say to as I guess we kind of wrap here, would say to again any developers on the AGS thing, make sure you if you already have a game, a lot of our close personal mates have games with that they're making an AGS, Julia and Steven and stuff like that. If you've got one, just open your game in Scum, copy the game ID. Go to the bug tracker and submit the ID for your game so that the next official release or for the next daily build, somebody will be able to load your game in Scum and it'll just have that nice polish of, Scum knows what game it is. You could even take it a step further. I just recently uploaded the icon for my game. Eugene, I don't know if you've seen on GitHub any of the Phantom Fellows, but that's the game I speak of because I was constantly sending you guys updates every time I updated the demo and things like that for my game. It's a lot of fun. So anyway, I just urge any developers or any fans just to get involved. If you've got a passion project, if your thing is Willy Bloody Beamish, it's time to start, reverse engineering that code one line at a time because, basically it's the community that makes it happen. So anyway, Eugene, thank you for your time. Everybody go check out ScummVM.org, obviously. And perhaps more so, or maybe a little less obviously, is that our mate Eugene here has a Patreon, which I just discovered and joined. So I would urge you guys to do the same. I'm just going to go ahead and put a link in the description. I don't expect anybody here to get a notepad out or anything. So we'll put a link in the description for Eugene's Patreon and, go show him some love and support. He's got some really cool tiers for the technical minded too, if you want to get involved. And with that, Eugene, is there anything else you'd like to say or anything you'd like to plug or?
No, it was really great. I enjoyed the interview. Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, mate.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, and to our listeners, just real quick, the usual, we're a Facebook page. You can find us there, the Classic Gamers Guild. You can find us on Twitter at CGG Podcast. Say hello to Anna there. If you'd like to say hello to me on Twitter, it's at Phantom Fellows. We're on Instagram at CGG Podcast. Send us a bloody email if you want to. Mail at classicgamersguild.com. We're also on Patreon, but let's not steal the limelight from Eugene. Go to Eugene's Patreon this time, all right? But to our existing patrons, thank you guys so much. We love you guys. Leave the podcast a review, I guess, and check out our adventure game, The Phantom Fellows, on Steam. Go wishlist it or whatever, please, maybe. That's it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Don't do a murder.